seat, an available seat of Congress. Yeah, that's bad news, I guess, because the super PACs weren't able to purchase that seat. Senators used to represent their state's legislature. As of the 17th Amendment, they are elected via popular election, which is good and bad news, I guess. Good news for those with a lot of money and foreign influence, and bad news for those that actually want their state to have some kind of rights. Yeah, freshmen! Really? It's kind of weird that they actually wrote this in the Constitution. They serve 6 years, and so this is to ensure there's a complete turnover every year. There's just the requirements to be a senator. And like the House of Representatives, the Senate can choose their own leaders. That and the Vice President is the President of the Senate, has no vote until they have an impasse. So he's the deciding vote if there should come to one. Okay, and so Senate carries out the process of impeachment, or the trial, so to speak, with the Chief Justice presiding. Now, here's the funny thing. It requires 2/3 of Senate present to impeach the President. So, you know, if you just don't show up to the trial, you know, you can save yourself from that highly contentious voter record. You know, if you've impeached the President, your name is on some sort of record, which may or may not have issues further down the line. So it's a perfect escape valve for politicians. And impeachment is not a criminal proceeding, meaning if they impeach the President, he just leaves office. They're not going to put him in cuffs. Now, when he's impeached and he's no longer protected by executive privilege, then they can levy other charges on him, which may or may not happen. We don't know. It's never happened before. I know President Clinton was impeached and he was disbarred but not arrested. So he's not a criminal. He's just an impeached president. And Section 4, really the states choose the methods of election for senators and representatives unless superseded by Congress. So no big deal. And Section 5, the House of Representatives and the Senate police their own. They make rules for their daily proceedings. They punish and expel members and keep record of their business and let each other know when they're taking breaks for more than 3 days. Standing operating procedure, really not hard. The big thing, though, is the record. It is by law that they keep record of their business. So it's a big deal when things like Lois Lerner or Lois Lerner getting rid of public record. Now, she herself is a public appointee. She's not an office holder. But that is, I think you can imply that. We'll look into that in the executive branch. But all public business needs to be recorded. And though she's an appointed officer and not an elected official, she is carrying out the will of our elected officials. So that's why it's a big deal, in case you're wondering. Also, with the recent Hillary Clinton's erasing emails and servers, interesting enough, it's not a big deal these days, I guess. But she herself at the time was a Secretary of State, so she is not she's an appointee, not an elected official. So the big thing, though, is even more so with these two, is that they don't have senatorial, congressional, or executive privilege. Like when Barbara Boxer released all sorts of quote-unquote torture details, it's okay. If it was any other human being, like, I don't know, Edward Snowden, that'd be considered treason and then we'd be chasing after her. But because she's a senator, she can do those things. She's protected. Compensation. Look, short of murder and treason, senators and representatives are free from arrest or detainment, just like I mentioned from the last section. If you're running for office, you can't serve a government post, cabinet, or department, or vice versa. Also, I think this one is pretty obvious, but senators and representatives get paid by the people via taxation and whatnot. So, all bills originate from the House. And the House of Commons, or the House of Representatives, as we like to call it here. Senate can propose or concur. So this is almost confusing, but in short, the House of Representatives draft a bill, the Senate amends it or approves it. Afterwards, it goes to the President for signature and becomes law. If he doesn't sign in 10 days, it becomes law. If Congress adjourns before 10 days, the President can veto it without signing it. But then again, why would you propose a bill and then leave, right? So if he vetoes it, then 2/3 of the House can pass it anyway. So when, say, Congress needs to act, right or left, it doesn't matter, but you know, the President gets held unfairly on. But then again, don't run for office if you can't stand the heat. And then this one's kind of weird because special measures or clauses or resolutions, they don't matter. They don't become law until the president signs it. So I guess it's just a matter of behavior between the Senate and the House. Okay, Section 8, we already covered this. All right. So kicking the can down the road, kind of like debt today, is not a new thing. It's been going on since the ratification. In this case, migration or importation of such persons as any of the states now existing shall think proper to admit. That's really just saying slaves until 1808. So I guess they figured after 32 years from 1776, someone else will have to deal with the problem. Oddly enough, they did. These are really big laws. You cannot be arrested without due process. But then again, what is public safety, right? And you can't be turned into a criminal by fiat or after the fact. If you're making alcohol before the prohibition, they can't just arrest you for being an alcohol maker. You know, I guess some people will call this the grandfather clause. If me myself would be considered a right-wing extremist or an anti-government extremist, Congress can't just make a law and says all right-wing extremists or anarchists are enemies of the state. That is interesting. Everyone needs their day in the sun in the trial. That's interesting. So when we detained Japanese or Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus, and I know it says here in the cases of rebellion or invasion when the public safety may require it. That's wishy-washy. You know, those are the moments of history which will define people. I contend that Abraham Lincoln did not need to suspend the writ of habeas corpus.